Hello, thank you for joining. I'm going to wait just a second because once I click go on the webinar, it finally allows folks to come in so I can see people popping in as Zoom lets them join. So I'm just going to wait a few seconds here to actually kick this off. Okie dokie, see a couple more coming in. But I don't want to wait too long since everyone that is here is on time, ready to go. So welcome to the Milestone 1 Proof of Concept webinar. I'm Will, Executive Vice President at BMI, and joining me is Kou Vue, who's our production manager. So he's the expert on projects and specifically Milestone 1 when we start projects. So he's joining to give his expert insight. Hello, Kou.
Hello, Will. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming to this webinar.
Excellent. So what I'm going to do, as always, start with the nuts and bolts. So if you can hear me, can you please raise your hand in the raise hand area? Okay, I see someone raise their hand. Perfect. That means it's working. 2 participants. Awesome. You can put them down if that's allows you to. Can you raise your hand for me if you can see my screen, which it should say nuts and bolts, and you can see me saying, okay, more raised hands. Perfect. All right, so everything's working. You can hear me, you can see me, and Kou. Awesome. You can see the screen. So you are muted. You're not on video. So if you do want to ask a question or make a comment or anything of that sort, just use the Q&A tool and ask questions along the way. We may get to them if we see them while we're chatting. If we don't, there's time at the end that we can check those Q&A comments. So onward, the purpose of today's webinar is to help you understand what we mean when we say M1, Milestone 1, and how it applies to our projects. Describe the why of the M1s, why we do them, why they're good for you, why they're good for us, and how they benefit both of us. And then to give you that nice warm and fuzzy feeling about working with us, BMI, that we're not just doing things haphazardly. We do have a method and a process to execute your projects. So first, what is a milestone 1? As I alluded to in the last slide, we just call it M1. It's basically a proof of concept. So we'll go through the steps of an M1, but it's really getting your project ready, doing a test, doing a proof of concept to make sure everything's being done correctly, that you like it, that we like it, and we're going to move forward the large part of the project successfully. It's the setup and testing of your project process flow. We'll describe more of what a process flow is later on in the webinar, but this is the bulk of what Milestone 1 is, getting it set up and testing that unique process flow. And the Milestone has not always been around at BMI. We've been around since the late 50s. We didn't always have an M1 process. I think it was before I joined, because our VP of software described it to me, but I think it was maybe 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. There was a project that we did. It was like 2,000 microfilm rolls or so-ish. And there was nothing really wrong with the project, but it wasn't exactly how our client thought they were going to receive it. So there's just a little miscommunication. We didn't have an M1 process in place. So they got the end result, because back then we would just do the project. And said, wait a second, this isn't how I thought it would be. The short story is we ended up actually just rescanning and redoing the project. And we thought there has to be a better way. So our team implemented the first version of an M1 process, and it's evolved through the years, over 15, 20 years to what it is today. So there are 3 steps to it: build, test, and refine. We'll go into each of those coming up next. Kou, is there anything you'd like to expound upon here?
Yes, I just wanted to reiterate the proof of concept. What it is it really is a benchmark or a milestone within the project that lets us both parties or all parties involved kind of see what the end result of the project will be. Just a small sample size of it, but it's kind of just a stamp of approval from both sides, and that this is what we're expecting the project to look like, to feel like, and at the end of it, this is how it's going to rest in its final deliverable state. So that way we have a timestamp of, yes, we're on the correct path, and now we can go forward with the rest of the production.
Thank you, Kou. That is his goal in life, is to have written approval that he can move forward with his team and do the project. There's nothing worse than having to go back there and say, where did we get that approval? Or I thought this, I thought that, they said this. We want to have clarity on the projects to make sure both sides are happy with the results. All right, so moving on here to the build phase. So remember, build, test, refine, a three-pronged approach here. First step is build, where we are going to create your process flow. Now, we say each project does have a unique process flow. Yes, every project is a unique snowflake, because even though it may be, you may have two, let's say, university registrars, we're going to give an example later, that have the exact same number of microphone roles and the exact same idea of I want role level indexing and timelines are the same. Everything could be the same in theory, but there's always a piece, always a step, always a nuance that will change that process flow. And even if you think it's the same, they're still going to be assigned distinct project process flows for those projects. We're not going to have an exact replica between two customers, even two projects from the same customer. This is building the process flow is the longest part of the M1. So you have a project, well, we typically say you're looking at about 2 to 3 weeks would be kind of quick. 3 to 4 weeks is a standard process flow build. It depends on the complexity of the project, depends on what you need, or if it's just a simple type of project or something that requires a lot more nuance to it. But it's typically the longest part of the M1 when you're building that, because we're building a process flow from scratch. We're making a unique step-by-step process for your project at the very beginning. So testing and refining comes later, but getting it ready is the longest part.
Yeah, I just want to follow
Do
up.
anything to touch on before I move on to a little more detail in the build?
Yeah, correct. I just wanted to follow up on the longest part of the M1 or of the project is the M1, in that the M1 takes a long time to build because we build off of templates, but each job, of course, requires customization to whatever build the customer wants, right? So the PM, the senior project manager who's setting up the process flow, is going into the itty bitty parts of the project, trying to build exactly what they want. And typically how projects work, they work on a bell curve, where the beginning of the project will take longer to set up. Then once we get that approval, it kind of lets us go off. It gives us the green light to kind of go in production full blast. So the project starts out slowly, and then as the middle of the project, the project will go up. And towards the end, when we get to the exceptions and everything, the project will slow down, and we'll get to the final 10%, which takes a little bit long time to do. But yeah, just the standard of the M1 will set the pace of the project, so that we know that when we're going full blast on the project, it's something that's been approved and it's something that's been accepted by both parties.
Yeah, we'll see some details of this coming up in the next few slides. I had a genius thought, but now I forget what it was, so I'll keep moving on here. So building, how do we build your process flow? So what we're looking at here is what we call Unity or Unity system. And this is actually an in-house application that our software team developed, I think about 10 years ago, Kou. If I'm wrong, you can correct me here. But what we used to use is off-the-shelf project tracking tools. It was called Job Track back in the day. And we also had something called SOP, which is called Scope of Project, where I think that was an off-the-shelf product too, I think. And we'd have these two systems where we'd create a project, it would get to the team, they'd start building it. But our team decided it would be simpler if we had our own system that worked exactly how we wanted it to. So our software folks created this application called Unity, because all our different pieces are tied together in this one system. So to build your process flow starts here. A salesperson will actually work with you, of course, get a scope of work together, get a contract going. Let's say that's signed, got a handshake, we're ready to go, we know what we're doing. SOP stands for Scope of Project. So we are looking at this is an actual project that I did. This is a real SOP. These were job prices. It was a smaller project. But what the salesperson will do is take that contract that you created, that scope of work, and then they translate it within SOP, which is within the Unity umbrella. They'll translate that into a project or a production Kou's team order, basically a work order. So if I have a contract scope of work, and the sales side, the language is a little different than what Kou's team understands. So this is basically that handoff between sales and production. So we create this, it gets into SOP, has all the different criteria, exactly what we're going to do. You can see we're scanning some microfiche. We're doing microfiche jackets, 300 DPI scanning. We're going to be making PDFs, indexing, deliverables. Anything that goes into the project will be an SOP. And then that gets submitted for approval by the team. And I'll stick on this. I actually review many of the SOPs from the sales team since I'm head of sales. So I know a bit about what goes into these, what needs to be approved, but then it goes to Kou's team. Every Wednesday, there's a new SOP meeting where they go over new projects or maybe updates to projects. And it'll be Kou, our VP of software, our Sacramento plant manager, and also our M1 architect, who we'll talk about in a little bit. They'll review all the SOPs that I approved that were created by sales and then say, does this match up? Does this make sense to what was approved during our project review meetings? Can it go through and get assigned to a project manager? It seems like overkill, but what we like to have is checks and balances, because sure, we have a contract, the salesperson creates the SOP, they may have missed something. I try to catch that. I make sure we have the documentation, we have signed contracts, we have POs, whatever's involved. Does it match with what we approved? Great, I'll approve it, but then Kou's team may say, well, Will, you missed something else. This needs to be reviewed again. So we can make those checks and balances before it gets to the real build phase of creating the process flow, so we don't expend wasted effort.
Yeah, so during this project assignment.
So this next picture here, this is also an actual project. We changed the name and changed a few things in the steps so it doesn't show who it is or any details of that sort. But this is a real microfilm scanning project process flow. So once it gets through that approval process, then our senior M1 architect will actually build the process flow. So in this case, it's 20-ish, 25 steps, something like that. So this will be utilized to run the testing in the M1. And then once that's approved and we do the actual project, we will utilize that approved process flow for the remainder of the material. So in this case, this is past the M1 phase, but you can see that during this project, these are microfilm rolls. We have 800 rolls are in this phase, a couple hundred are here. There's some in these areas that are in various stages of processing, which actually, Kou, you may want to chime in on what we're seeing here once these process flows are built.
Yeah, so this is a standard typical process flow. As units move through the chart, that'll give the project manager more visibility over, how far along they are in the project. There's multiple reports that a project manager is going through every day to kind of manage the units going across. So this is the status chart. There's also a status report that will give you all the numeric values of each step. And then the performance chart will, dictate how fast we're going, the speed, the velocity of these units moving through the flow. So really what the project manager is paying attention to is trying to move as many units through the process flow from the beginning to the end, from left to right. And then as these colors turn red and purple, those are kind of exception states. So either the units have something that needs to be resolved, or for whatever reason have been stalled in those at those steps. And so the project manager will go and resolve them. But typically it'll be like a 10%, 20% exception rate, where most of the green will just kind of flow through. So it's kind of like a waterfall effect, where the units will usually just go through the process flow and typically they don't have any exceptions. The project manager is responsible and tasked with resolving those last 10%, so we can get from the start to the finish line. And then as they're resolving those exceptions, also they're learning at the same time what are causing these issues, and that kind of lets us know to look out for these things in the project in the process flow as well. So it's kind of good for scalability, visibility, and to kind of gauge what exceptions we might foresee in the project.
Yeah, exactly. And something I was thinking of while Kou was talking is, you see here, so this is once the process flow is built that we're going to use for the project, but kind of going back to that Unity system and how it's all intertwined. This is part of the jobs section. So once we're actually utilizing it, it's in the actual jobs category. We're working on a project. But from this side here, you can see the online SOP, which we were just looking at before. That's tied into Unity. We can do material tracking. So when projects come in, we track them. Once we receive them, we can see every step of the way of where a project is. Going back to the SOP, we're on the services line here, but you can see there are attachments like contracts, POs, amendments, whatever it is, timelines of revisions, invoices. So everything is tied in the system, so we can track your project at any point, what we're supposed to do, documentation, what's going on, like Kou said, on the process flow, exceptions, and that sort. So everything's tracked within Unity.
Yeah, I just wanted to.
All right, so that's the build phase. We build out your process flow. We translate it from sales. We do the handoff to get approvals by a team, and then goes to the senior architect, senior project manager, who's our M1 architect, to build that. Then once that process flow is built, so imagine there are no bars here, it's just blank and steps. What we do next is the test phase of the M1, which is just testing a small batch of materials. So what we're doing here is we're taking, let's say, the 500 boxes of records that you want to scan. They're all the exact same type. It's a consistent project. We may scan 2 or 3 boxes to run it through that process flow and make sure that, one, the process flow works. So this is just internal still. We need to make sure what we built will actually suffice for the project. We get to test your actual material before we go, as Kou said, full blast into, okay, now we can get more of our folks on this project. We can hand it off to the project, the individual project manager, not the M1 architect, but the project manager will run it for production purposes. We want to test that and make sure everything's working correctly and we don't run into something weird. So yes, you have a 500 box job. We test a few boxes. If it's what you say it is, what we all talked about, maybe we reviewed it, we did a sample before, great. The process flow should work fine. It's going to be consistent. But a lot of times we will find materials that we didn't expect, we didn't know about. Even our clients didn't realize they had certain things in their collections that they go, oh, I didn't realize that was in there. Oh, I didn't realize it was that type or it was different than what we already talked about. We want to catch that as much as possible during testing. We can retweak the process flow and make sure that we're accommodating at least the known knowns of the project before we go into full production mode. And that's basically cleaning up the process as well before showing it to you, our client, when we go to the refine phase. Anything here, Kou, on testing?
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on that. The testing phase is a very collaborative phase, right? It requires multiple shareholders to be involved. Sometimes the client is involved, the senior PM is involved, obviously, production manager is involved, and then the software developers are involved as well. Because when we're meeting about these projects, we're also going through the SOP, looking at the scope of it to kind of strategize what's the best and most efficient way of doing these projects. And that's where, you know, ideas get thrown in. We need to look out for this. These are things that we're kind of pay attention to because it requires, you know, this minute detail. So it is a very collaborative effort in that we're all kind of throwing in our ideas, and then we're also going back to the client and say, hey, look, we found this. We might need to do this, or this might require this instead. So the testing phase is very collaborative. Everyone's getting in on it, and then once we get the testing through, we'll kind of have going to the production or to the approval stage, in which the client will actually look at what the final deliverable might look like.
And I have a real life example, actually, Kou. It was yesterday, so I'm doing a small project, so it's kind of different than a full process M1, but a small project. My project manager reached out to me. It's a couple thousand microfiche, and he sent over some strips of images saying, hey, these are on copyboard. So what that means is, I don't really have a great example, but copyboard, if you're not familiar with microfilm, microfiche, and copyboard, imagine my phone is the actual image that's on a strip of microfiche. Copyboard would be like this background, and the image is like that. So when they're taking photographs, they put the actual document on top of this background. And so on the microfiche, the entire thing's showing. So he sent that over. I mean, Kou would be better equipped to answer how much we see of that, but probably like 10-15% of images will have that, maybe. So he sent that over saying, hey, here's the M1 for you to review, Will, but there's copyboard. So I looked at it, go, okay, my client may be okay with that, she may not. And then before moving forward and talking to her and showing her this whole testing process, I want to see it first is, well, what's it going to take if she doesn't want copyboard to crop those images just to the image, not the full copyboard? So I actually asked Kou, and Kou not gotten back to me yet, of what it'll take to get those images cropped. Because I'd like to go to my client and say, here's what we agreed to, which is the frame, including the copyboard. But if you don't like that, we can do X. It may cost more, it may not. Maybe we can include it. Maybe they want it regardless. So this testing showed something that we did not expect, that we didn't know about until we got the materials and did the M1 process. So that's why it's critical to do these, because we wouldn't want to deliver that. And she says, whoa, I don't want this copyboard. I just want the image. Oh, I didn't know. So this helps us catch those things before it gets going. Now we're on to the refine. So we do the test. We're in the review and approval stage. So we're resolving errors or changes. Now, errors doesn't necessarily mean we did something just grossly wrong. It just means maybe just adjusting steps. So we find something that, hey, we tested the M1, the process flow, and for some reason the materials get caught up in this step. Okay, we just need to tweak it to remediate that, whatever it is. Or maybe your material doesn't match, just like we were talking about. Maybe we're capturing images to the frame, but we see images that are on copyboard. It's not that we can't do it, it's just it doesn't match what we believe to get, what the contract says, what we agreed to do. So we just need to kind of tweak those. There may be changes. So you might want something updated. You don't like the original scope potentially, or you don't even know you don't like it until you see what you get. And this has happened before, where we're working with clients. We do the M1 approval stage, and whoever the salesperson will say, hey, here's exactly what we said we're going to do. We all agreed on this. This is what we all wanted. And our client says, yeah, you're right. You did do that. But now I kind of changed my mind. I want to do something a little different. Maybe it's around indexing, how you're going to name those digital files, just whatever the change is. Nobody's wrong. You just finally see it in a digital format. You say, you're right. I did think I wanted that. Now I'm kind of changing my mind. It's like when you go to a restaurant, you order something and you go, yeah, I kind of want what this guy has now. It's the same idea. But unlike a restaurant, we're going to say, sure, let's talk about it and then see how we can change that for you. There may be a small cost, but a lot of times just small minor tweaks here and there. It's not usually anything that's just a massive change. Now, the key thing with the M1s and why we're so focused on these and even doing an entire webinar for is because without approvals, we stay in the M1 phase. It's once it gets to M1 approval, maybe the salesperson reviews it with you, or maybe you just take a look. We just send the files directly to you and you're just reviewing them. We're not going to go forward with the remainder of the project until we get approval on the M1. It's just something that we require now because we want to get confirmation that we delivered something based on what we agreed to do, or maybe tweaked it a little bit. But once we get, actually that's critical. If we do change things, that's again, we'll send another approval saying, okay, based on these changes, do you approve going forward? We have to have approval to do that. So if we continue doing what we said we do, there's not a miscommunication of, hey, I didn't say I wanted that. We're avoiding those steps now. It's setting expectations early so everyone's on the same page and gets what they want at the end of the project. 2, what are some thoughts?
Yes, and just to piggyback off of your point there is.
Hold on, Kou, it took a second for it to pick you up. So start over again.
Okay, just to piggyback off of that point, this is why the M1 stage could be the longest stage of the project, is because of the refinement stage, right? This is where we're going over the details to make sure that this is what the end result is going to be like for both parties. To Will's point again, it's not that anything's wrong. It's just that now that you finally see it in digital format, or whatever the final format may be, there just may be changes or tweaks that might make it more efficient for you to do your searches. So one example is, and we run into this all the time with these types of projects, is when you see some paper or when you see fiche, you see these manual media or these physical media, it's very hard to articulate how it's going to look like in a digital format, sorted, organized, or grouped together. So when that happens, you realize, I didn't want all of these things grouped into one folder, where now when you click into that folder, there's millions of records. I wanted it to be sorted by this or grouped by this, so that it's easier for me on the eyes or the end result user to actually search the files that they need. So it's just getting the refinement stage is getting the result so that to the end user, so they can see and experience the interface, just so they can confirm that this is how they really want the end result to look like, so that we know we have a timestamp in the project that says this is what we're expecting and we're going to go forward from here on out.
Yes, exactly. And I was just thinking it's a common trend to think once something digital, it's just going to be perfect. And that's not that we're trying to tell people it's not going to be a great product, but it's just seeing the transition versus what you kind of believe to happen. Hey, it's digital. Shouldn't it do this? Maybe that's not always the case. So, getting those expectations set, seeing the M1, understanding what you're getting, absolutely critical. So let's say you approve it, show you the M1, we maybe change something or not, whatever it is. Once it's approved, then we start moving forward with the remainder of the project, like those 500 boxes, we may be doing batches of 100 at a time. Great, we got you 3 boxes done. Let's go pick up those 100 and start moving. The rest of the project will go along nice and smooth if everything's consistent. If it's not, some other type of material pops up, there's some change that's not that wasn't caught in the M1 or wasn't known to anybody, we'll flag those as exceptions, talk to you about here's what we found, here's some options that we can do, whatever it is. We'll catch it. I mean, projects always have these little nuances, but we'll flag those as they come along and work with you on getting them processed as well. But the M1 should be capturing most of that, and it'll move on fairly smoothly. So here we have an example. Let's do an M1 example. First page is scope of work. So let's just assume you work at a university, you're a registrar, and you have microfilm rolls. Let's say it's 2,500 rolls of microfilm, and they're 100-foot simplex. So there are 2 types of microfilm, 100-foot and 215-foot. And then simplex means 1 frame, or 1 image per frame. If it was duplex, you might have images on top of each other, let's say. But simplex is the classic 100-foot simplex, just image, 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 image. And there are roughly 2,500 images on each roll of microfilm. So 2,500 times 2,500 would be total number of images. They're student records, so we know the security type. And you want to index by the roll label title, which will be on the side here, maybe on the flip side of this. We'll show an example in a second. You want OCR text search, and you're going to be loading to our digital reel platform. So that's the basic scope of work that you're looking for from us. We agreed to this, contract, great, everything's agreed to. The steps to create that M1, we're going to prep the microfilm, we're going to do density checks, we're going to look at the strips to make sure there are no breaks or tears, there may not be enough leader on the film, which is blank film that you have to have at the beginning so it can start scanning. We'll have to scan the rolls, of course, that's what you're actually looking for. We're going to import to digital reel, we're going to index them, which is digitally naming them. Let's say we're also going to crop those images, so we're going to provide what we call traditional outputs like PDFs of those images and files. We're going to deliver those to you. So that's the scope of work that we're looking for and how we're going to get it done. Step 1 would be build. Step 1, like we talked about, sales, let's say it's me, I'm going to go in, enter this project into SOP. That's the handoff, creating the work order for Kou and team to then review it and start the process. Project team, which is Kou, will review it for completeness, and then they'll assign. So we assign a PM, but we will have that senior PM, the M1 architect. She typically is building most of the M1. So she will build the M1, but we will also assign the project manager who will take over once the M1 is approved. So we have multiple project managers, and they have various areas of expertise, but once that M1 is done, a different PM will take over to run the project through to completion. That the senior PM or the M1 architect will design the process flow, which can include steps such as photographing the label. So we talked about roll level indexing. When we scan in digital reel, we always include a photograph of the label as well. So you can always see what the original name of that file looked like. UID, which is unique identifier barcode. So when we get those rolls, as we're photographing, we're gonna stamp or place a barcode on it so that every step of this project, who's ever working on those microfilm rolls can scan it and say, this roll is at this phase. That's what ties into this tracking mechanism, and how Kou can say, yeah, roll number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is at bill event or wherever it is. That allows us to track every single unit during that project. Density and quality checks, as I mentioned, we'll actually check the density at 3 parts of the roll to then calibrate the scanners. So that's part of this step, this process flow. Scanning the rolls, indexing by keying the roll label. Image framing is a step we have to do. Importing digital reel, adding the OCR. These are all steps in this process flow that we will have to apply and run rolls through. These red images here, these red rolls, those exceptions may be something like it went through OCR, OCR failed. Why? We don't know. That means the PM, the project manager, has to go inspect that exception to find out, why is this roll in red? Why did it fail the step? Do I need to send it back through the process, or is it just something that's not going to be resolved because the images are so bad, we're not going to get OCR? That's what that project manager is doing, is monitoring and resolving exceptions and making sure the project is running. Might do a USB, and then of course, we have a bill event on there as well. Kou, anything on the build process for the example?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that we, with our tech, it allows us to do all of this within the Unity system, right? The Unity system tracks all the boxes that come, all the UIDs that get affixed to the roles, where they run through where the units are within the process flow, and then like Will said, it also allows us to generate invoices, track contracts, anything that gets put in there. So it's kind of a fix all that shows us everything within this project. All units, all boxes related to the project, and it allows the PM to easily manage this up. So to earlier point where we run into problems in the past, it was very difficult for project managers to kind of scale multiple projects. With these tools in place now, it allows them to manage multiple projects at once, making sure the units are moving through. It allows them to automate a lot of these processes so that they can make sure that they're hitting the units that they're wanting to hit. So just going to build or emphasize that on the build is that this is allowing project managers to really focus on the projects and focus on multiple projects all at once.
Thank you. All right, let's see. Now we are in, so we build it. Great, we have the process set up with all those steps that we need to make this registrar student record microfilm project work. We get into testing. So 2,500 roles, maybe we say, let's take 5 to 10, because 2,500 roles, you're going to be carrying multiple decades, different years typically, and well, they typically have different quality of microfilm, maybe different companies filmed during that time. So you're going to see various layouts. We'll take a few roles to be a representative sample of this project. If there are multiple document types, then we'll also make sure we cover each document type. And that could be, let's say instead of just student records, it was 1,500 roles of student records and then 1,000 roles of finance department. We'd want to do a few roles from each document type because those may require different process flows in and of themselves. So we're going to cover not just a few roles from the main batch, but if there are multiple document types, we'll cover that as well. Each role will then run through the process flow, say, does it work? Is it coming out properly? Sales will take a look at it, say, yes, this is what I asked for, perfect. Or if something comes up, production team will let us know, let sales know, hey, there's an issue, we need to talk about this. So in this case, we said it's going to be a role label indexing. This is an example of what a role could be. So we're going to capture that and use that as the naming of the file in digital reel, and then also when you get the cropped images for PDFs. But as we're doing the testing, if you remember, we said this is going to be 100-foot simplex, which means 100 feet of film per roll, simplex, 1 image per frame. But we catch this during the M1 testing phase. This is duplex film, which is no one thought there would be. Maybe we even did a sample before actually agreeing to move forward with the project, but we didn't see this in the sample either. And our clients a lot of times don't know what they have either. It's not uncommon. We catch this. Not only is it duplex, if it's duplex, it's probably 215 feet as well. So give me an example. 100-foot simplex film could have 2,500 images or so. If it's duplex, you're doubling the length of the film. So imagine doubling the image count. Yeah, 215. And if you're duplex, you're also doubling that. So you could have up to 15 to 20,000 images, which we've seen. So that affects the project because it's a lot more film to scan and a lot more images to process. That is very likely, almost definitively, going to change the scope of the project as well as some pricing. So it'll be something we want to talk about, figure out how many roles are in this that are like this duplex film. We'll need to figure that out. But we will adjust the process flow. We'll talk to you about it, figure out how do we move forward based on this new knowledge we found during the testing part. And then refining, of course, test is complete. We do it. Then we'll show the roles in digital reel, following the example. Let's say it's me again. I talk with my client, say, hey, here's what they look like in digital reel. Also, here's some examples of the cropped images. You have your bitonal and your grayscale PDFs. Those look great too. You like the indexing. Awesome. We're reviewing that, looking for one, of course, image quality. You want to see, did these turn out well? Are they representative of the quality of the original record that we're scanning? Does the indexing look accurate? Is it correct? And does the material match the scope of work? That's more for us. We're making sure that the material does match what we agreed to do. These are the main things we're typically looking for in M1. There might be other small things to review, but image quality, indexing, and material matching the scope of work are the big three. And then of course, if it's needed, we'll go and tweak and update the scope of work and the process flow to match that, like that duplex 215-foot film. We'll talk about that, figure out a way forward, and then adjust as necessary to then rerun that M1, get approval on that update, and move forward with the project. And once it's approved, the project continues. Kou, anything on refine that you'd like to say before moving on? If you do, just give it about 2 seconds before you start talking, because the mute thing kind of delays a bit.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on the point you made earlier about your example about the restaurant. So this is that in itself, is that it's, for example, you're ordering a steak and you want the best user experience. You want now have to have a dessert on top of that steak. This is what the refinement stage is, right? We show you the M1, you see it and you use it. It works just the way you want it to, but you think it could be a little bit better. Added this, or added OCR, or added grayscale scrolling, something that you wouldn't have foreseen that you wanted in the very beginning of the project. But now that you actually have something real to work with, you see that you can refine it to make it a little bit better user experience for you or whoever the end user is. That's what this stage is for, is so that we both can come to an agreement to say, okay, we can make this for you if we do this, we can do this if we do this. So yeah, I just wanted to use that example that you had earlier, kind of to bring home the point that we're in it to make it the way that you want it to look. We know that you might not be that way the first go around, so we're willing to do whatever it takes to get it to whatever end result both or all parties require.
Exactly. The whole point of this is collaboration, making sure both parties are happy when the project's over. We don't want to be angry that something went wrong, or there's a disagreement or whatever, and you don't want to be unhappy that you get a bad result. We all want to be on the same page saying, this was a great project, we love working together, let's do it again. That's the goal of having collaboration during the M1, so you don't run into issues later on in the project. But that does wrap up the presentation part, the discussion with Kou. I'm going to see if there are any questions. Let me see here. Does not look like there are any at the moment. I'll give it about 10 seconds for a final call on questions before I move on to some contact information if you're interested in getting in touch with us. I don't see any. Oh, here's one. What factors impact project setup fees? Well, it's interesting because project setup, the inside joke, I guess you could say, is a lot of times the project setup, by the time you get it set up, the project could be over sometimes. So like the small project I mentioned earlier, sometimes we have minimums, because by the time you get a project set up and you do the M1, you get these process flows, you have all these people involved. If it's a smaller project, the scanning's a very quick part of it. So you're making sure that for using all these resources, you're getting what you need. What other things impact project setup? Indexing is a huge one, or the basically complexity of the project. So if you have very granular indexing, like page level, multiple format types, various document types, that could be something that we're going to take into account when we're giving you a project fee, because it's going to take more work up front to get that even set up. Not just doing it once it is set up, because then you have that process flow. Just figuring out how to set it up is difficult. What else could be involved? I just had one in mind. Multiple material types could be something. If you have one material type and it's consistent, then you're going to have a project set up that part of it will tie to that. If you have multiple material types, you may actually have multiple project setups, because as I think I mentioned before, if you have different document types that require maybe different indexing, or they're being delivered differently, or they're just different styles of records, we may have to build multiple process flows. And some people may think, BMI, you're crazy, why would you do that? Because after probably tens of thousands of projects by now and decades of doing this, this is what we found to be most productive and successful to make these projects work. So those setup, it really comes down to the individual project. What you have, how much of what you have. Indexing is a huge one. Can or can we not use partners to help us with various parts of the project? Multiple of these things will come into play. Kou, anything on that? Or does that pretty much cover it?
No, I think you covered most of it. I think you covered
it. Sorry, Kou, it doesn't let you, it kind of cuts you off for a second before you talk.
Yeah, I got it now. I think you covered most of it. The one thing I wanted to bring up was that for project setup fees is software development, right? Not all projects are going to be just the standard boilerplate, right? It's when it requires customization, when it requires custom code that our software developers have to write to do it, that can impact project fees, setup fees as well.
Yeah, thank you. All right. I don't see any more coming through, but thank you for the question. So now I'm gonna click over here, and here's all my contact info. If you have any follow-on questions, or you're curious about getting in touch with us for a project, here's all my contact info. You can actually hold up your phone and go to my LinkedIn to reach me there. We have a YouTube channel with videos coming out every 3 weeks, and then also we have a newsletter if you're interested in just maybe you're not ready to do a project, but you want to kind of in the back of your mind. I'd say get on our YouTube subscriber list and newsletter subscriber list every other week for the newsletter. You'll get the newest articles, videos, any new webinars that are coming, things of that sort. So when you're ready, you'll have that information in the back of your head thinking, I have a good idea of what I should be doing and what I want to happen. But that's it. Wraps it up. Thank you for joining. Appreciate you coming to this. You'll get a recording sent out. I plan to send out tomorrow, and looking forward to seeing you at the next webinar coming up in about 5 or 6 weeks. Thank you very much. And thank you, Kou.
Thank you, Will. See you, everyone.
All right. Have a good one.